Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to the Himalayas, literally the roof of the world. Up here, along a line that isn't really an official border, two nuclear powers are locked in a tense standoff. We're going to break down how this remote, frozen landscape became one of the most dangerous flashpoints on the planet.
The whole story exploded back into the headlines with a brutal, high-altitude clash in the Galwan Valley. I mean, think about it. For the first time in nearly half a century, soldiers were actually killed in direct combat between these two countries.
The numbers were stark. 20 Indian soldiers lost their lives, and China also acknowledged casualties. And the fighting itself, it was brutal. We're not talking about guns. This was with fists, rocks, and even makeshift clubs in the thin, freezing air. This deadly flare-up brought a long, simmering dispute to a boil and raised one huge question.
To answer that, you have to get your head around the source of the conflict. They're fighting over a border that doesn't officially exist. Seriously, it's a line drawn from history, from war, and from two fundamentally different ideas of where one nation ends and the other begins.
Okay, so at the absolute heart of this conflict is the simple fact that there is no agreed-upon border. To understand why, we need to talk about something called the line of actual control. Right, so this isn't an internationally recognized border you'll find on every map. It's a de facto boundary, the line of actual control, or LAC for short. It was basically born out of the 1962 war when China declared a ceasefire and just drew a line where its forces were standing. And here's the kicker, it's not marked on the ground. So both sides operate based on their own perception lines, which, as you can imagine, leads to some very frequent and very dangerous overlaps. And if you want a perfect illustration of how deep this dispute goes, get this. They don't even agree on how long the line is. Why the huge difference? Well, it's because they can't even agree on where it starts and where it ends. It's a fundamental disagreement about territory that stretches for thousands of kilometers.
So, the LAC is generally broken down into three sectors, and each one has its own unique history of claims and strategic flashpoints. In the west, you have the high-altitude desert of Aksai Chin. And over in the east, China claims an entire Indian state, Arunachal Pradesh, which it actually calls South Tibet on its official maps.
So, the crucial thing to remember here is that this isn't just about empty mountains. It is absolutely about strategic control. For China, Aksai Chin is vital because it connects its massive regions of Tibet and Xinjiang. For India, controlling the Himalayan heights is just essential for its national security.
And the geography itself is a huge factor. The landscape is so incredibly difficult. We're talking about a place where rivers can change course, lakes shift, and mountains are constantly being redefined by the elements. Trying to agree on a clear, permanent line is a massive challenge, and patrolling it is even harder. So, how did we get to this point? Well, the tensions we're seeing today, they aren't new. They're actually part of a long and very consistent pattern of conflict. Let's just walk through the timeline. As you can see, this timeline reveals a really clear pattern. You get these periods of diplomatic calm, like the agreements in the 90s, but they are always punctuated by military confrontations. From the war in '62 to the standoffs in Doklam and Galwan, the core dispute has never been resolved. It's only ever been managed. And that 1962 war, that's the event that really set the stage for decades of standoffs. The line was basically defined by the victor on the battlefield. China declared it after its forces, who were facing really severe logistical problems, just couldn't advance any further. This created a legacy of mistrust and a foundation for all the future conflict. Okay, so that brings us to the modern era, where all these old tensions are being fueled by brand new developments. Both sides are digging in for the long haul, and in the process, they're fundamentally changing the facts on the ground. So here's the question, right? If they signed all those peace agreements, why have things gotten so much worse now? Well, the answer really lies in a strategic race to build and fortify positions all along this disputed frontier. And what one side sees as necessary development, the other sees as a direct threat. This is a classic security dilemma. It's a cycle of action and reaction. For decades, China built tons of roads, airfields, and buildings on its side. Now, India is rapidly catching up, building key strategic roads like the one to Daulat Beg Oldie, which dramatically improves its ability to get specialized mountain troops and supplies right up to the front line. When you combine all these factors, you get an incredibly dangerous situation. You've got high numbers of troops, you've got rapid infrastructure growth, and you've got the deployment of more advanced weapons. It creates this super volatile environment where even a minor clash between a couple of patrols could escalate very, very quickly. So what does all this ongoing friction mean for the future of two of Asia's biggest powers? Where do they even go from here? This quote from India's top diplomat really captures the reality of the situation. The trust that was built up by those agreements back in the 90s, it's been severely damaged. The entire relationship has been reset to a much more adversarial footing.
And this table perfectly shows the fundamental clash in their goals. India's objective is to get things back to the way they were before the 2020 clashes. China, on the other hand, seems determined to exercise control right up to its own perception of the border. And look at the perceptions. India sees its actions as countering Chinese expansionism, while China sees India's growing ties with the US as a threat it needs to counter. They're operating on completely different logic.
Looking ahead, it seems like there are three broad possibilities. And according to most analysts, the most likely outcome is this middle path, a long-term, uneasy state of competition, a kind of muddling through, where both sides are constantly jostling for advantage without tipping into a full-scale war. But the possibility of escalation is very, very real.
And here's a really crucial geopolitical consequence of all this. China's actions on its land border may have inadvertently strengthened a maritime coalition, the Quad, that's designed to counterbalance its influence. By pushing India so hard, China may have created the very thing it wants to avoid, a more aligned group of powers working together.
And that leaves us with the critical question. With such deeply entrenched positions and competing national narratives, is a permanent resolution even possible? Or is this a conflict that's just destined to be managed but never really solved? That's a question that's going to shape the geopolitical landscape for years to come.